All right, I see a few people trickling in, so we will wait a few more minutes. And for those of you who've already joined us, please take a look at the DCSWA Code of Conduct on the slide that's currently up, and follow the panelists and me on Twitter. Richard, I think we can see your notes right now. I think we can see, yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know the whole screen was visible. Okay.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Cool.
All right, it is 6:30, so I will just hope that more people are joining as the day ends. So, all right, well, welcome and thank you for being here today at the DCSWA Artists Behind Science Storytelling panel. My name is Praborna Ganguly and I will be your moderator this evening. I am delighted and excited to talk to these three wonderful panelists today and discuss their fabulous work and hopefully get some advice for those interested in the sphere of science illustration. So I will be asking the panelists a list of questions, and then we will move towards an audience Q&A about 15 or 10 minutes before the end. So if the panelists can turn on their videos now. Wonderful. Well, we'll wait for Nicolle. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, everyone. First off, we have Jeff Day with us this evening. Jeff is an assistant professor in medical and biological illustration at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, where he teaches courses in design and animation for their graduate program. He has also worked at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History as an educator and at the National Library of Medicine as a digital media specialist. Jeff is interested in accessibility and usability in educational media, cartoons, and nature. Welcome, Jeff. Next, we have Christine Liu. Christine received her PhD at UC Berkeley in neuroscience while communicating science through art. She's the co-founder of 2Photon Art, where she creates designs, enamel pins, and jewelry that celebrate STEM. One of Christine's main missions is to make science more accessible, and she often works with engaging, friendly forms of communication like murals, activity books, social media, and tattoos, which is super cool because I have two of my own, so that's really cool. Welcome, Christine. And then we have Nicolle Fuller, the founder and creative director of Scio Studio, which is a science illustration shop. Their goal is to more broadly support the science communication needs of scientists at universities, nonprofits, and tech companies. Previously, Nicolle has worked as a staff illustrator at the National Science Foundation and also interned at the Stanford Linear Accelerator. Nicolle has illustrated the graphic adaptation of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species and created animations and illustrations for numerous science magazines, national parks, and biotech startups. Oh, welcome, Nicolle. What wonderful resumes all of you have. All right, so first off, what I would like to do is a round robin and ask each of you to take a minute or so and tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing today so the attendees can get familiarized with your style of work. First, we will start with Richard. Yes, Richard is gonna share the screen and wonderful. Well, Jeff, you are first. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing today.
Thanks. Thanks for having me very much. This is pretty exciting. So I graduated from the Johns Hopkins Medical Illustration program in 2015, and they teach you all sorts of different visualization and illustration techniques. So on the bottom right is one of my student pieces, very anatomical, very traditional. Getting into it, I always viewed myself as more of a cartoonist, and I have kind of like a cartoon mindset, I guess. I like trying to make things quick and punchy, and hopefully maybe a little bit humorous and engaging. I was pretty proud last year. I got a journal cover that you can see, Nature Genetics. And this is showing these CRISPR Cas proteins illustrated as bunnies. A lot of times they're illustrated as scissors, but I thought it was a unique take to have them illustrated as bunnies, and they're attacking this garden of DNA, and we have this P53 protein that's protecting the garden. So I thought that was kind of a fun take. And most of my work since graduation has been animation, and I like explainer animations, so I do a lot of those types of things. Those might play, I don't know, Richard, it's just a loop, but no worries if not. Yeah, so excited to talk to you guys.
Wonderful. All right. Christine?
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here with you today. So I have done a lot of art on the side of pursuing a PhD. So I really view it as a form of self-expression, as a way of having fulfillment, and a way of engaging with people about topics that I find fascinating. You can see here that I do all sorts of things, make all sorts of things like enamel pins and zines. During the pandemic, I started making YouTube videos while I was just cooking a lot, explaining the science behind some recipes and products that are out there, as well as some murals and tattoos, as Pravarna had mentioned, and some jewelry as well. So really just, I view my art practice as just kind of a way to act on ideas that I have as I'm being inspired by my own research or the work of others, and to connect people who might really not feel very included in, the scientific enterprise by their experience with science education, and make them feel like it's cool and it's accessible, and to invite their curiosity. And we had a lot of success with that with these zines, which are basically DIY art booklets, and they're called zines, pretty much short for magazines. They were really popular in counterculture movements in the 80s and 90s. A lot of like music, kind of punk things were communicated through zines, and really engaging with the community in the Bay Area through zines has been so powerful. Just to talk to regular people outside of the PhD scientist bubble, and really hear what people are curious about. And that has taught me a lot about how to communicate with people on their terms and tap into their own curiosity. So that's what I'm always chasing when I'm making art.
That's terrific. Nicolle?
Sorry, unmute. Hi, now that it's my turn, I don't know where to start. Let's see. So I started out with a lab background in biochemistry, and I've been doing this for a while. I went to the Santa Cruz illustration program before it moved to Monterey Bay. And I've had the good fortune to get to do science illustration on a ton of different topics. So a lot of physics, astronomy through NSF, and earlier before that SLAC. And so let's see, it's been about, I don't know, I've lost track. 15 years about, maybe more, that I've been out on my own doing work. And so I work directly with scientists, magazines, book publishers. And I guess what I really love doing is imagining science as almost more like a scene, and how do we capture people's imagination and honor the enthusiasm and excitement and hope that science has. Because I think that so often, it's like, oh, it's dry, it's very logical. And of course that's important, but there's a lot of excitement to it all. So that's what I try to bring to it. And I also really love trying to hide lots and lots of details in the artwork, so that even if somebody who doesn't know about science enjoys the art, that scientists can also feel respected and enjoy it and use it in their talks and their websites. So I think that is my big summary. I guess the one other thing is that this past year, I have been expanding my freelance gig into a full studio. So now we have a couple different animators and other illustrators and designers working with us. And we're also working on partnering with writers, which is exciting. So
that's very, very on point for us. All right, so I think, Richard, you can stop sharing your screen. Fantastic. All right, so the obvious first question that comes to mind is, how did you get into science illustration and creating science products like Christine? So any of you can start.
Sure. Since you mentioned me by name, I guess I'll go ahead and start. It was, again, like I mentioned, just a way for me to have kind of like fulfillment through instant gratification, because doing research, oh my goodness, you try so many things, they tend to fail. You don't ever really feel happy about something until maybe like a year after it's done, when you know for sure that you got it right. But for me, at least, making art in the way that I do, where I'm just, it's very casual. That's not my career at the moment. I can really just try something and see if people like it. And if they do, then make more of it or try something else new. And I feel like for me, it was a really good way to tap into my creativity and curiosity and attention to technical detail without it being attached to my day-to-day, my main project of my research. So for me, it was really just iterating on things that resonated with other people, which is exactly how it taught me how to understand what really got people curious and excited. So yeah, we started it also, it was myself and my friend who I met doing undergraduate research in 2012. We were like, let's make something together just to try to hold each other accountable to keep making art. Because at that point we had each just spent a year, for me in graduate school, and she just started working full time at a nonprofit in environmental science. So we're like, we have no time to make art. We're going to have to force each other. So we're going to stay on top of this. And so that's when we made our first zines, applied to a zine fest, and just the reaction that we got there, talking to people who literally said things like, I never ever really thought I could understand science or do it because of the way that it was taught in school, but they were just in love with the way that the content was being communicated to them in these little art booklets. And that really helped us realize how powerful it is to speak to people directly in their chosen media. And oftentimes it's not necessarily the content that drives them away, it's the way that it's being communicated, and these artificial barriers that we sometimes put up, especially for things like science, where we want to maintain some level of rigor and prestige. So I know that's, seems like really deep way to explain making things like enamel pins, but that's kind of the motivation behind all of that.
All right.
I guess I could go next.
Yeah.
So I always loved being a cartoonist, and my goal as a kid was to be a newspaper cartoonist back when newspapers existed. And so I liked drawing to communicate a message. And then the other thing I always was a science nerd. So I went into medicine. And as I was training in medicine, I realized that I'm probably better as a science communicator and nerd than a clinician or actual scientist. So I was lucky to eventually find medical illustration, where I got to do more of the communication part professionally. And so it's been a joy ever since I found it.
So I guess I said a little bit that I started in a lab out of undergrad. I never made it to science grad school. And I worked for 3 years, and I had a similar experience, I think, as Christine, where the troubleshooting, like, it just killed me. I mean, it's just, to all you scientists out there, it's hard work. And so I love reading the abstract and getting to read the conclusions that other people have done the hard work for, and then helping them get that out there. Let's see, as far as how I started in the art side, I used to do artwork just as stress relief. And so the art that I actually like to do if I'm doing it on my own is just like huge scribbly stuff. In the background here, I have paintings. I actually sadly hardly ever paint. I just have that there to try to remind myself that I can, because almost everything I do now is digital. But anyway, so yeah, so I went to the illustration program at Santa Cruz, and they really help you learn how to tell a story. I think that's what was really useful to me. Let's see, what else is useful? I don't know. Yeah, I think that's the quick story of how I got started. I guess as far as how I stumbled on the field is I didn't even know that science illustration existed. I'm guessing that's how a lot of science writers are too, that you read this stuff in textbooks and in nonfiction and you don't realize that there's somebody doing that behind it. And I think I stumbled on it just by some random Google search one time, like, aha, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. Yeah, and I love it. So I've definitely had my ups and downs. I'm just going to put this out there really quick before I pass it off, that I have, because I might be a tiny bit older. So I have 2 kids. And so I've had ups and downs of like trying to deal with having young kids, and they're a little bit older. It's getting a little easier now. Anyway, so yeah, thanks.
I think it just goes to show how much we need access to the different kinds of science communication and ways in which we can express ourselves when it comes to, you know, our service towards science. So that's really, really enlightening. Thank you so much for sharing that. So how do you pick projects and work with science writers and content creators? Where does the process begin? And I'm sure that it's going to be different for each of you. So I'm really curious to see how that occurs.
Maybe I'll go first this time. I feel like I keep forgetting what I'm going to say by the time it gets to my turn. Just 3 people and I forget. I'm a very visual person, so I have to, you know, like draw stuff out. This whole talking thing is difficult sometimes. I'm just kidding. Sorry. Yeah. So what were we talking about? Yeah, so how people find me, how I choose projects. I'm actually really lucky. For the most part, people come to me. And so people find me through my website. I am not a huge social media person. So this past year, we've just really tried to double down on that so people can find our work. So yeah, I think it's a pretty quick answer that for the most part, people come to me. And I think it's self-selecting at this point because I have enough work up on my website. Usually people come to me that know that they're a good fit for the most part. And so we talk about their project and talk about solutions and then go from there.
Okay, I'll go next. So currently at Johns Hopkins, our medical illustration program, we are about half teaching students, master's students, and half production. And so like Nicolle, we're lucky that people come to us mostly within Hopkins, but we have some outside of Hopkins clients as well. So that's where a lot of the medical illustration work comes in. And so you could have a variety of projects, from someone wanting their research illustrated, or maybe a surgical procedure. Some folks want animations. Some folks want something more decorative, like a poster. So we have all types of projects. In my short time there, I've written a few grants towards what I'm interested in. So I was lucky in that I got to create my own projects. Very interested in accessibility and learning about how folks who have lower vision can access the work that we do. We do such visual work, but it's very interesting to me how we try to make it as equitable and usable for them as well. So I've been making some animations and multimedia in that realm. And before this, I was working at the NIH. And I was also making explainer animations, and I got to work with several communication departments around the institutes, working with their science writers and communication departments. So that was a lot of fun as well. And we worked together to create our topics for what we wanted to make an explainer video out of.
Very cool.
For me, it's almost all self-publishing. So I tend to just choose projects based on whatever is like feels really itchy in my brain. Like, I have to talk about this. I have to tell someone about this. Or, you know, I'm just have a piece of paper in front of me and this is just what my current obsession is. And so that's why I engage in so many different kinds of media too, because for me, it's really an exploration and a method for expression. I have been contacted and have done some commissions and projects in the past for publishers, for different companies or organizations. But I've learned through that I actually really don't like being told what to do. It's actually really hard for me. Something weird happens inside when I feel kind of constrained by another person's goal or intention, not necessarily in a bad way. Like, of course, this is necessary for really strong communication, but I find that that's not a strength of mine. In fact, I tend to crumble a little bit under the pressure of making something perfect for someone else. So for me, I really leaned into, let me make something that I think is cool or I just feel like I need to make, and then let me put it out there and see if it resonates with people. And so I have gotten offers for work and requests because of what people have seen. And if it's a really good fit and if I have creative freedom, then I tend to take them on. But I'm getting a lot better at being realistic with what I'm capable of doing, because the truth is, for me also, I'm not like the best artist. I cannot do realism, like medical illustration, scientific illustration. When I learned of that, I was like, that's very cool, but that's not for me because I don't have like the patience for it or just the eye for it. I think there's really something special about what the details that really amazing artists like Jeff and Nicolle are able to accomplish, you know, converting the visual information they see from their brains onto paper and digital media and animations. But for me, I just, you know, throw the art that I make out into the world and hope someone likes it and that it sticks. And for the most part, I'm very lucky that it has, despite much of my style being more of this kind of like simple or grungy kind of aesthetic that kind of, I think, was shaped by the experience of making zines in this kind of punk scene.
That's really interesting. Just because it goes to show that there's both a space for a personal expression, you know, as well as a collaborative experience. So two sides of the same coin. Yeah. And this might be a little bit more attuned to Jeff and Nicolle, but when it comes to working with science writers, what does an ideal collaboration look like? And what advice would you give them when working with you? You know, what should they bring to the table beforehand so that it can make, you know, your work process easier?
Do you want to go first, Nicolle? Not this time.
Yeah, Jeff, you can go first.
All right, I'll go. I don't know that. I work a lot in animation, so we actually need writing, so definitely helps whoever the client is or your collaborator if they come with a script or an outline. So the process is basically we start with the ideas first, script, outline. Then we storyboard it. So we put images to the words and we try to time it out. And then we'll record the audio and, you know, make the images and animate it. I guess a good collaboration is when both parties respect each other, obviously, and both parties take each other's ideas well and give good constructive criticism. I will provide a lot of feedback for what I think will work. I do try to shorten scripts and shorten sentences to make sure that they're really punchy. We work together to try to make the lines very descriptive as well, because like I said, I'm interested in accessibility. So for those who don't see as well, it's nice to be able to have the words describe what's going on in a video. Yeah, and then of course, having both sides being humble, I think is good too. You know, myself, you know, artists, we take our work very personally, and to be able to take critique well, I think is helpful. And same thing with writers. You know, as the artist, we'll probably we could rearrange a lot of the words to, you know, fit the timing or or the linear narration a little bit better visually. So those are some qualities, I guess.
Nicolle, do you want to go next? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the first thing is that sadly, a lot of the time I'm not working directly with the writer. A lot of times it's going through an editor or an art director. And so usually the way it works is I'm getting the well-developed draft from the writer. And so I don't actually get to interact with them directly. And so the work I do, I mean, is very driven oftentimes by what the writer has written. And I guess when I'm talking about this, I'm talking more in terms of magazine work I've done. And sometimes the descriptions they have are, they are great jumping off points for me to do the work. So I guess this is more like a wish that I wish that there was a way for it to be a little bit more collaborative, because I've found that there's a lot of times that as an illustrator, there's little tiny details that you might read in like the methods section of the actual journal article that might not necessarily be relevant to what was written on the page because it's too technical to write out, but we can show in the artwork. And so if the writer was able to see that, to see like, oh, okay, they've already gotten that covered, like, or, oh, I see how they showed that. Now that gives me an idea of how to describe it in this different way that might be more accessible. So yeah, so that's my answer as far as that. And I think it just goes back in general, when I do get the chance to work directly with writers, it's really great, as Jeff said, when everybody's willing to be collaborative and help share resources. I guess that's a big thing, is that oftentimes people I think are trying to be nice and like, oh, well, I don't want to, burden you with, the actual journal article or the manuscript or these figures. I'm like, no, send us everything and we'll sift through it and let you know. I mean, because even if there's things that we don't understand, it gives us the keywords to look up and try to figure out what we need to understand. So, yep.
Christine? I know that, this is kind of like a, like whatever version of this that works for you,
Yeah, I mean, I certainly not in the traditional sense of collaborating with a scientific writer or editor for magazine. I mean, I guess I've done a little bit of that, but it's not my bread and butter. So they're more one-off experiences. But for collaborating with me in general, I know that I like to work with a lot of feedback, really quick, very direct. I prefer someone to tell me outright, what they don't and do like about things, rather than, skirt around the topic. And so I typically also, I just like to throw everything at them, and tell them like, just, delete the things you don't like, circle the things you do like. And I really like it, as Nicolle was alluding to for it to be a very interactive experience where we create something together. Like it's very co-created to the point where the graphics and the content of what's being communicated are really being created with each other in mind, so that we don't really have to have, just one piece as is and then mold everything around it, but really think of the best way to communicate something. And I really love to be able to pull something out that does seem really technical and difficult and use visuals to transform it into something that's very intuitive. Kind of like Jeff's example of the journal cover too. Like, you see this like angry dog and you see these like little bunny scissors, and right away it kind of pops out to you the relationship of these different, very abstract, tiny little like proteins that are inside a cell, but the way that you can present it can be very compelling when things are really thought and designed to be that way together. So for example, just in the zines that I make, I often will have a text and the images right next to each other. The text will have an arrow pointing to exactly the part of the image that I'm talking about, because it's such a pet peeve of mine also to read journal articles and they're talking about a figure and you have to like flip over 2 pages to look at it. So I really like everything to be right there in front of you. And so I think animation is also, that's really the gold standard for having that really targeted immersive learning experience, but it does take so much time and effort that it's difficult to have everything be explained that way. So co-creating the visuals and the writing in a more 2D piece or, static piece is very helpful for me.
I think that as someone who, was in grad school and had to read all of those journal articles, I completely agree with you. I think that can be quite challenging to make a cohesive framework around this. So that makes a lot of sense. What are some of the challenges that you have faced at work? And my one particular interest in asking this question is, you are all incredibly successful in what you're doing now. But when we think about starting out in something like this, which can largely be a freelance effort, what were some of the challenges that you experienced early on, and what kind of advice would you want to give, people who are interested in foraying into this field? Christine, do you want to go first? Oh. Or Nicolle, sorry, please go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going let's see, challenges. I was going to kind of use this as an opportunity to refer back to a question that somebody asked about how I started getting my connections and how I first started freelancing. And just to say that it is challenging. And a lot of it was I had a staff job, and I started doing a few freelance projects here or there based on the work I have. So a lot of it is, it's hard to get your foot in the door initially. And then it's also hard even once you do, to decide to take risks and make that leap. And so this is kind of a meandering answer, but I wanted to say that there were definitely jobs that weren't quite as specific to what I knew I wanted to do. Like I just, like I explained and showed, I like doing these kind of immersive scenes. And so initially I was doing some more like graphic design and doing newsletter layouts and plugging in type and making sure the font and captions were all right. And that was not what I signed up for. And I can't tell you how much I learned from that. I mean, just like the skills that I learned were great. And that gave me, like a solid base to take the risks to try to start finding clients. And then as I slowly built them up, then I could take the leap to try going out on my own. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a very broad question. As far as taking risks is difficult, but.
No, but I mean, it's true though. That's true. Yeah. Jeff, do you want to go next?
Sure. I would say in our field in general, medical illustration, it's very challenging. The programs are challenging because there's so much to learn. You have to learn a lot of science, anatomy, a lot of software. And that's one of the greatest challenges too, I think, is keeping on top of the trends, on top of software, on top of the science. So that's a big challenge. I think for someone starting off in this field, and any field really, is finding your niche and figuring out, what you feel like you're best at and what your superpower is and how you're going to use it. And if you can figure that out and cater towards your strengths, I think you can have more passionate work and impactful work.
Yeah, kind of just to bounce off of finding your niche, I feel like that was and remains a challenge for me. I think there's a big identity crisis for a lot of people who are, getting a PhD in research or doing anything else, like have a day job in science and want to do art, or, they're being trained in art, but they have an interest in STEM. The way that for some reason, like the American educational system in particular is set up, like creates this false dichotomy of feeling like you have to choose one or the other, because there are even these like brain myths of like the left and right brain predisposing you to be better at like, humanities and arts versus science and mathematics and physics, whatever, which is just completely false. But I find that can be a big barrier for a lot of the people that I talk to, and for myself too, in really owning the fact that we want to make art or that we want to do science, and choosing one doesn't mean that we have to abandon the other. And so I think maintaining a strong sense of direction while doing this is very difficult because you have a lot of external biases that might be affecting you. But I would say, you know, what sets you apart is your ability to have these multiple skills, and that creates a niche for you. And I think that it's always been a strength now for people to recognize that I can, you know, understand the scientific content within neuroscience at least, and create a compelling visual image, and that they basically get 2 in 1. But that, you know, is the positive side of the coin, where people think that I might be a distracted scientist, or, you know, amateur artist or something like that. So I think it's okay. You know, I'm not the best artist, I'm not the best scientist, but I probably am the best like zine making systems neuroscientist. And that's great because a lot of people want that kind of work. And I think owning that is really important, because there's so much pressure to, you know, be like everybody else so that you can be the number one in this kind of homogenous pool, when that's not really what is going to get you the farthest with something as subjective as art and communicating science.
Yeah, Nicolle, please go ahead.
I thought of one more big challenge based on what they were saying. So as Jeff was saying, you know, keeping up on software and everything is really difficult. And I'm just amazed. I'm just going to throw it out there. So I got my graduate science illustration degree in 2003. So I've been doing this a while. So I was cutting edge that I had a website. And so I just wanted to put out there that marketing is, I know, look at you laughing. So marketing is hard. And it's hard as you go on to stay fresh. And like Christine was saying, it's almost like a continual like self-reflection of like, yes, I'm still good at what I can do, at what I do, and how do I continue to be good at what I do, and how do I continue to tell everybody about that. And it's been difficult and challenging to get used to marketing now, which is so different, and it's so much more personal. If you asked me that if I would be on screen having this discussion with all of you, you know, 15 years ago, like there's no way. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
So kind of piggybacking off of what all three of you have kind of mentioned, which is finding your niche, finding your style. And my question then is, how did you find your style? Like, what were some of the ways in which you realized, you know, this is Christine Liu's way of evoking emotions, and Nicolle's way or Jeff's way? Like, what were some of the ways in which you went about that?
For
Jeff,
me, a lot of trial and error. Yeah, you know, honestly, it took me a long time to even realize what I personally like to do. I feel like a lot of it comes with just getting older and having experience. Like how old were we when we first really learned what being thirsty felt like, and drinking water was the solution, you know? Like now I can actually, the other day I sat down with like a brush pen and like thick paper and like put some lines down. I was like, I can literally feel like the dopamine in my brain, like this weird, like swelling in my chest of feeling like I just inhaled some fresh air, that like takes a long time to really just understand like the physiological response that you have to your own work. Kind of like this feeling that you get when you walk into a museum room with art that just really resonates with you. It's not really something I think that you can systematically look for. I think it's really about being in tune with how you navigate the world and how other people respond to your art, at least for me, because I am still very much figuring my style out. In fact, you know, I'm just starting to learn how to tattoo, and I again was just creating so many different kinds of designs, and I was seeing what people resonated with. But my mentor in this new shop told me, like, you obviously can tattoo, you can come up with great designs, but you need to take a step back and reflect on what you think your best designs are and present them to people, kind of like Nicolle was saying, like, so that you have a brand, so that people can look at your work and kind of understand you and what they can get from you, rather than just this like hodgepodge, can do everything kind of thing, you know, like jack of all trades, master of none. And so it's a work in progress for me, but that's how I've approached it. And I think I'm finally starting to find my style.
Yeah, I very similar answer to Christine. I think just the more experience I had going through med school and working afterwards, you learn what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, how you like to work. And then you also build some confidence in some of your skills. Like Christine, I always said that I feel like I'm a B+ writer, B+ artist, but you put your things together, and then there's less and less people who might be performing in that niche, and then you could do a good job.
Yeah, I think it's definitely ongoing. I mean, having done this for a little bit, a lot of the work I've done has been for clients, and so it's interesting to try to create something for somebody else that they want and that what they're asking you to do, but still do it in a way that is interesting to you and interesting to me. And yeah, and I think as I'm going on in my career, trying to figure out, like, really take a step back and one, make time for me to do some personal projects and actually consider what I like doing. I mean, and not just like, oh, I can do that, I'll do a good job, but also more, what I really want to do. And a kind of random example of style, I have always done swirls. There's always, if you look in my portfolio, there's a ton of swirls, and it used to drive me nuts. Like, even if I do my abstract art, there's swirls and everything. And I finally just accepted that's the way my brain works, and I've integrated them in, and I'm happy with them now. But then on the other hand, I also want to keep looking at it, try to be as objective as possible so it doesn't get stale and it doesn't get old. And how can we continue to work with whatever it is that my brain seems to keep wanting to do in new ways? So
no, that's really helpful. So when it comes to illustrations and in a scientific realm, there is obviously journals, as we saw from Jeff's work. There's the work that Christine and Nicolle, you both are doing. Have you ever considered trying out aspects of science illustration that might not be as obvious? Or have you seen any kind of new styles of illustration in the scientific realm that are a little bit offbeat that you are potentially interested in pursuing, or that excites you?
I'll start with this one. I love the sort of more, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the words, but anyway, I love the work that Christine, that you do. It's just a lot more direct isn't the right word. I need a science writer to help me with the words I'm trying to, but no, I don't think of like quick, not that your work is quick, but like single images that really convey a lot. Like, I like to have these really involved. And so I really respect other people that can do that. I can't do that. I don't want to do it, but I really like that work. And I think that there's a lot of, I don't know. I think there's a lot more opportunity and a lot more great work being put out there that doesn't have to be done, like over the course of an entire month to do this huge, like mural-like work. And I think that a lot of people respond, and it feels more accessible in many ways to people than work that is a little bit less like realistic and detailed. And so I can tell you why I think the realistic detailed work I do is great, because I've got to give you my sales pitch, but I do like all the other work that other people do, and I like seeing it out there. So.
Well, thank you. That's a huge compliment, because, when I look at your work, I can't even, I would be like, I don't even know where to start. Like, literally, this would take months. I don't know. Like, it's just so intimidating, the amount of detail that you can get in there. That is also, it's so evocative. There's a lot of emotion and motion, like in your pieces. And yeah, so I think, my minimalistic style is a byproduct of being like, knowing my limitations, and on time and on skill. But one kind of art form, a scientific art form that I've been really interested in, want to gain skills in is data visualization in a really compelling way. I think that is going to be really useful. And we've seen so many ways that data can be misrepresented, just these intentional or unintentional ways that data can be, communicated visually that gives a totally different message depending on like what the scales are at, depending on where you set different colors or even things like that. But I think that's something that I really want to get involved in. But maybe it's just too close to home for right now. It's like I'm drowning in data, so I just don't, I need to escape from it, which is why I have these like simple kind of like iconography, like minimalist art pieces. But I think it's just such a very cool field that's happening right now in data viz.
Yeah, I agree with Christine. I didn't think of it, but I am also getting more into data visualization and trying to pass it on to our students, and having more and more of their traditional pieces add on a bit of data viz elements. I think it's very important, very helpful, very trendy. I think I do a lot of animation. When I was working at the museum, I did a lot of teaching and I created presentations, and I discovered that I like giving presentations. And so I view videos and animations as kind of like an extension of giving a presentation. So I really love the format, but I'm always watching whether it's explainer animations or cartoons or post art, whatever you see. I'm always interested to try out new styles and try different animation techniques. And then the field of medical illustration in general, I think, 20 years ago, folks would never have imagined all the crazy things that people are doing nowadays with 3D printing, with virtual reality, augmented reality, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. So it's fun being in the scene and trying to be a part of it and seeing what's coming up next and trying to keep up with it.
Yeah, definitely a lot of cute, cool, new styles of communicating for sure. What would you say is a common misunderstanding that people might have about science illustration and art making in your field particularly? It could be related to, entering the career or anything that happens within the process of creating the products in the first place. So, Nicolle, do you want to go first?
I'm actually drawing a blank. So if anybody else has something that comes to mind. Okay, so misconceptions. Oh, I should have an answer to this off the top of my head.
I can go while you're thinking.
Thank you.
Well, I'll say first, I think it might be hard for us to think about, especially me, because I don't get a lot of questions about misconceptions. Usually questions are like, what even is that? Like, people haven't heard of it, right? So people have never heard of medical illustration or anything. So you have to explain it. I think a lot of people, when they find out what you do, they ask, oh, do you just do it all on the computer? And yeah, pretty much we do it on the computer, but you still have to have the basis of, you have to have the eye, and, a lot of the sketching and the iteration is still by hand, whether it is on a piece of paper or maybe your drawing tablet. But the fundamentals of visual storytelling are still the same.
Mine is kind of a joke answer, but people always assume that I really like to make figures because I like to make art and I like to do science, but I really do not like making figures. Again, I think it's the thing of feeling very constrained and having to deliver information in a very specific way. And I do not have that. Like, I have the attention to detail when I really need to have it, like in my experiments, but when it feels pointless, like making all the font sizes exactly the same and, like the borders, all the same point, whatever, I'm just like, this is so tedious. I don't feel like I'm being creative or doing anything useful. So that's my, the biggest misconception people have about me personally as a scientist / artist.
Okay, so I thought of something. So one of the biggest things that we run up against is people just misunderstanding how long it takes. And I think part of this goes back to what Jeff was saying, that, oh, well, you just do it on the computer, right? You just push a button. And so I try to think of it as educating the client, educating the person that you're working with, that you can't ask me for something Friday morning and expect it Monday. Like, you know, we have a life. We're not going to be working over the weekend unless you want to pay extra. And even so, you know, these things can take, you know, if you're doing an animation, it's going to take a long time to render out all of those frames. And even before you get to that point, making sure that the concept is dialed in and all the research that goes into that. So just the misunderstandings of, you know, like people not knowing how much background research we do for these things, and then how much work it takes at each step. So yeah,
it's one of the things that I personally have experienced as a writer. When I've asked our graphics team to come up with something, how long it takes, it took me a while, because I think I had the same misconception in terms of, because we know how long it takes to write something, but for someone who doesn't know how to make art, it's difficult for us. So that's a really, really good point.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm assuming it's similar in writing, where, you know, especially at the concept stage where you're trying to, you know, get the outline figured out, really, you know, the concept stage, that sometimes it clicks, but sometimes it doesn't. And you have to account for that when you're estimating time, that like, okay, this is the longest I know it'll take. So, you know, I need this buffer time because it might go faster, but chances are it might go longer because it just takes a while for the wheels to turn. And
I just want to jump off of Nicole's idea. Yeah, I agree. People don't realize how long it takes. And a lot of people think you just do it for fun, which it is fun, but it's a lot of work in doing the research and all the asset creation as well. And I think people balk a lot at the cost of it, but it really does take a lot of time and effort to create. And not just the art part, but even the writing part. And so when we're working with the writers, not everyone will realize, like, if you want to create a good animation, the script is number one. That it's number one over the visuals. And so, you know, sometimes when you're working with scientists or writers, they might not realize like how many iterations it takes to get like a really punchy, strong script.
Yeah, I hope that all the science writers who are attending are taking notes. So we have a question here, which is, with COP26 happening now, what are some of the art pieces or science communication styles you've come across to help talk about climate change, or to help people understand and take action? So I think this is something that any of you can answer, but Christine, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. For me, I think I really like the warming stripes graphic, which is basically like every line encodes like the median temperature that year for like 200 years or something like that. And it's just very stark, almost like blue and then red, with like a little bit of mix in between. And some really amazing art pieces have been created by different people based on this data set. People will do like knitting. So they'll knit like a line for every year based on temperature data. And I find that that's a form of data visualization that is extremely compelling and visceral for people. And they can extrapolate, like, what would it look like if we added, you know, a few more inches to this like warming striped scarf. So I think that is particularly effective for helping people realize, you know, there's always going to be ups and downs. There's like blues and reds and whites like intermixed, but when you take a step back and look at it, it's a very stark progression of temperature increase over time.
I don't have a lot of experience with climate change art or data visualization, but I will say that the data viz is very compelling to me, and including graphics like by I think XKCD. I think he's done a data viz cartoon that was very impressive. But I think an interesting challenge is, for all the data viz pieces, I think they're kind of preaching to the choir. Like, all of us who are interested in looking at a graph, like we buy it. And so an interesting question is, like, how do we create a piece that speaks to those who are not really into data or, not into a graph? How do we cross that line? I don't have the answer. I'm just asking.
I think that's a $1 million question, isn't it? in today's political climate. I had one question that I wanted to get to before we have some other audience questions, which is, what do you think is the role of scientific illustration and product creation to generate a dialogue about authentic representation? Because obviously when it comes to diversity, so the field that I'm from is genomics, and we have a huge issue with lack of diversity in our studies. And I think this is something that can be pretty much transposed to most other fields. So what would you say your efforts are in order to make some of these issues heard just through the images themselves? Nicolle, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I guess for me, in my little, sorry for the dinging going off. I thought I turned those notifications off. In my little area, I guess I try to always now come from the point of, as simple as it sounds, not showing a white man as the person in my image is first and foremost, and that not being the default. And sadly, I've been working from that place for quite a while now, but it wasn't the first thing I started. It's amazing when you Google, like a disease, like illustration of, cancer, illustration of it's all like the same, like bald white man over and over again. And yeah, I think it's really important for us to see ourselves, in these images. And I think it also reflects back on the science. I think it helps anytime there's a visual that represents more people, it helps remind the people that are doing the science and the policymakers that, we have to keep in mind that, it's the entire population, a diverse world we need to consider and serve.
So the question was about diversity, how to represent it?
Well, yeah, exactly. Representation and how science illustration and product creation can do that.
Oh, yeah. So in the Association of Medical Illustrators, we have a diversity committee, actually. And every year we will have diversity speakers, and we have some certain illustrators who are very good at illustrating folks of all different skin colors and showing, conditions that might look a little bit differently depending on what kind of skin type you have. So definitely within the past few years, it's become more thought of, and I think a lot more illustrators now are trying to be thoughtful about that process.
For me, I guess I can speak a little bit to the product creation part of it, because yeah, that's a huge part of my journey with Two Photon Art is being a woman of color in a PhD program and noticing the lack of other women of color in the program, particularly those who are, have face even more like systemic exclusion beyond a Chinese American woman, which I would say is probably represents a large majority of people in my field, actually. And so one thing that people constantly face, especially women of color with darker skin, is people just not believing that they're a scientist. Like, you don't look like a scientist. And so we kind of tried to subvert that and get ahead of it by creating these nameplate necklaces, which are a very popular kind of jewelry that emerged out of like New York counterculture, particularly in like the Black and Latinx communities with people's names. It was like a very coming of age kind of symbol. But we make them and they say things like scientist, engineer, doctor, professor. So people can wear these necklaces and walk into the room and have no doubt that they belong there. And that it also strikes up conversations too, because little girls will read this necklace that someone is wearing and ask, you're a doctor, and that'll start a whole conversation that might not have happened because of the assumptions that people make, including, you know, little girls of color or anyone participating in society based on the predisposed notions that we have in representation. And so that's just, you know, a very small attempt in a piece of jewelry to kind of break the cycle and subvert stereotypes, but it's been very effective in terms of making people feel like they have tools to show themselves, show up, and express themselves. And I think, you know, when we created that product, we also donate a large portion of the proceeds to organizations that actually support people who are underrepresented in the field, creating conferences for them, programming, scholarships, et cetera. And so, you know, we tried to take, you know, a multi-pronged approach to support other people in the field. And we're very careful also to avoid tokenizing people too. You know, there's a very fine line between representation and tokenism, especially, you know, when you're going to post a picture of somebody to advertise a program because you want more people from diverse backgrounds showing up, but it's a huge problem when that person was not part of the program to begin with, had no affiliation, and it's just plastering an image that isn't a true representation of the efforts that are being made to address these issues. So I think, you know, like we see here, everyone can do something small, you know, for a large wave of change. And so I think it's important for science writers and illustrators and everyone involved to think of, you know, the little things that we can do to try to change the tide.
Oh, small effort, big impact, right? I think that's definitely true. We have, Alan, on one last question that we have from the audience, which is, what animation and illustration trends or approaches in other fields would you like to see more of in science? And are there any changes that you would like to see in the field per se? I think this is like a really nice way of talking about the future of science illustration and product creation that would be great to hear you speak about.
I would like to see, you know, there's all these kind of like interactive websites nowadays with like, you know, even just reading a news article. Again, I think this goes back to data viz, but, you know, there are really, really engaging ways that I've come across information that I think would really enhance the literature reading process. You know, like I'm looking back on my times as maybe like a high school student stumbling across a journal article that was interesting to me, but not really having the vocabulary, the resources to really navigate it. But there's so many tools now where on some websites you can hover over a vocab word and a little pop-up will happen so that you can see a little picture or have a definition. And the Innovative Genomics Institute, the IGI, that's a CRISPR Institute affiliated with Berkeley, they actually do that on their website. So that's really accessible for people to go on there. They have little articles and it does exactly that, where you hover and they'll have an icon that actually helps design so that it's kind of a friendly experience and it doesn't interrupt your entire flow as you're trying to learn if you have to like go off the page and Google something else. And so I think that would be super helpful, ranging from, you know, lay audience to me as a scientist. Like I have no idea what this protein is and they don't define it because it's so obvious to the authors of the paper. But if there's just like, you know, an interactive thing that I can kind of learn about it really quick and stay in the flow of the narrative, that would be, I think, very helpful for a lot of people who have attention problems or, you know, like are just going to get distracted by a bunch of tabs and different things like that.
My answer is similar to Christine's, but maybe even simpler. I think over the last few years, visual abstracts are becoming more of a thing. And I think they're a great way to understanding an article quickly, but they can only be understandable quickly if it's done by someone who's kind of skilled at that visual communication. So I don't know that I have a solution, but it would be great to be able to hire someone to be able to do a visual abstract for every paper that comes up. I think the big journals like JAMA and New England Journal, I think they have a bunch, but you know, with their own staff illustrators helping out, but oftentimes the scientists are expected to provide them themselves. And I think that can be kind of a tall order for many scientists.
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to riff off what Jeff said. I do think it's great that scientists themselves are realizing how much ownership they can take over having illustrations created. So I've had a lot more scientists come directly to me to work with me for journal covers and for graphical abstracts and actually figures. And so it's been fun, especially for environmental science and ecology, to actually create more like fully developed 3D landscapes as a figure in just a, you know, a typical journal article. The problem is that it's the researchers and scientists who are paying for this. And so I don't have a solution there, but I'm excited to see scientists wanting to and knowing to reach out more to artists, illustrators, even animators to do the work. I just, I don't know, maybe it's an issue of really doubling down on, you know, say the NIH and NSF's, you know, they have a mission that you're supposed to broaden participation. And so to make sure that they're able to use that funding to help to get professional graphics and such. So it's not all, you know, coming out of their research funds that are supposed to be used for other things. And I don't know. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic, journal publishing, but yeah.
No, that's yeah, definitely. Well, we are getting some more questions, but we will have to wrap up since it is almost 7:34. I can send some of these questions to the three of you if you're interested in answering. But I just wanted to say, Christine, Jeff, Nicolle, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think I know for a fact that I've learned a lot about the whole process of science illustration. And I think as you know, as a science writer, having that engagement and interaction is so important in order to create more holistic, far-reaching products. So this has been fantastic. And for all of you who are still here, I just wanted to say that DCSWA is going to be having another event on November 7th, hosted by Sam Jones. It's going to be a watch party and then a Q&A on Netflix's The Mind Explained with Adam Cole. So that's going to be a hugely awesome event. And I think Richard just posted some of the information here. So please go to DCSWA's website and register for it, because I think it'll be a wonderful event. Well, again, to all the panelists, this has been such a great joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And have a wonderful evening, everyone. Enjoy your Wednesday.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. It was so nice meeting all of you. Have a good night.
All right. Bye.